Welcome to our video guide on how to install Breathaplasta. My name's Tom, I'm the founder of Adaptivate, and I used to be a plasterer. It was really important to us to design the product so it was easy for you guys to install. It's called Breathaplasta because it breathes with the people in the building. We create loads of moisture, cooking and cleaning, and this can often lead to condensation and mould. Well, Breathaplasta is a skim plaster on the inside of the building that breathes with the people in the building, reducing this risk of mould and condensation, and ultimately leading to healthier people in energy efficient buildings. Enjoy the video and the 4 easy steps on how to install it, and we hope you enjoy using Breathaplasta. Before we mix and apply our base coat of Breathaplasta, we want to ensure that our plasterboard is securely fitted with no drywall screws protruding from the board and with all the joints scrimmed with tape. Beading fixtures and fittings should all be either stainless steel or plastic. To mix a full bag of Breathaplasta, add approximately 11 litres of clean water to the mixing bucket. You may need a little more or less water depending on conditions and temperature. Open a new 20 kg bag of Breathaplasta and tip around half of the contents out of the bag into the water. Use the paddle mixer to mix the material for 10 to 15 seconds, or until there's no visible lumps. Then add the remaining contents of the bag and mix for a further 60 seconds. Use your bucket trowel to scrape the sides of the bucket and ensure you've mixed in all the dry material. The final mix should be smooth and creamy in texture. You may want to make it a little thicker for applications such as a base coat onto a brick wall, or a little thinner for applications such as a top coat onto plasterboard. It's all down to your personal preference. Once mixed, plaster can be applied immediately and you will have approximately 30 minutes of working time. Tom's top tip for mixing Breathaplasta is don't mix old Breathaplasta and then apply it to the wall. This affects the setting time and the workability and could make your installation a bit harder. Take the plaster from your hawk onto your trowel and apply smoothly to the plasterboard. Use standard plastering techniques to achieve a flat and even surface to a thickness of approximately 2 mm. Work the plaster away from the edges of the room and in the same direction where possible. It is important that you don't overwork the plaster at this stage. The base coat may look a little coarse and granular, but this is normal and will give us a good key to apply our top coat. Once the first coat is applied evenly, you can go over the wall and flatten. The base coat will take around 45 to 60 minutes to go off depending on your conditions. A little longer in cool damp conditions and a little less in warm dry conditions. One top tip for ensuring the plaster is set enough to apply the top coat is the tacky finger touch test. Touch the plaster with your fingers, and if it's still tacky to touch, it's probably not set enough for the top coat. Go and have a brew or something, wait a few minutes. If it's not tacky to touch, then you can crack on and get the top coat on. To apply a top coat of Breathaplasta, take the plaster from your hawk to the trowel and apply smoothly onto the set base coat. Use standard plastering techniques to achieve a flat and even surface, working the plaster away from the edges of the room and plastering in the same direction where possible. Use your trowel at a shallow angle and apply a firm pressure as you move it smoothly across the surface so that you push the plaster into the base coat. Avoid scraping the plaster. As you apply the top coat of Breathaplasta, you should be able to achieve a smooth surface, but don't worry about getting the finished look at this point, as we need to come back onto it again to trowel it to our desired finish. Tom's top tip for applying the top coat of Breathaplasta, it's all about trowel angle. We don't want to scrape the material across the board. Instead, we want to have a nice shallow angle of the trowel against the material, pushing the material into the board in a smooth action. When troweling and finishing Breathaplasta, ensure that your tools are always kept clean. Misting the surface of the plaster can also help smooth out any imperfections or trowel marks. At this stage, you may also need a small amount of material to fill any low points in the plaster. To achieve a smooth surface finish, trowel the surface of the plaster with an even and consistent motion and apply firm pressure with the trowel at a shallow angle to the wall. Care should be taken to avoid aggressively scraping the surface of the plaster. Instead, the trowel should be used to gently close in the surface of the plaster with a smooth action as shown here. We've used a stainless steel trowel here, but we know that you have your own favourite finishing trowels, so it's all down to personal preference. To achieve a textured surface finish, use a wet sponge float with a light and even pressure to bring the texture of the material to the surface. This should be done in a circular motion. The more you sponge float the plaster, the more textured the final appearance will be. So Tom's top tip for finishing Breathaplasta to a smooth finish is all about trowel angle again. A nice even smooth action with a shallow trowel angle to the board. You can use a bit of water onto the trowel and onto the plaster to get a nice smooth surface as well. We know you all have your favourite finishing trowels, so it's completely up to you which trowel you use as your preferred option to get a nice smooth finish with Breathaplasta. I hope you found this how-to video guide very helpful and you've managed to achieve your desired finish with Breathaplasta. If you do have any more questions, then just phone one of our team. We're happy to hear from you and we hope you've enjoyed using Breathaplasta.